Welcome to the Divided States of America show, where your host, Marlon Gardenera, takes on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. We'll sort through the best and worst of politics and culture, asking questions and looking for answers that our two-ring, two-party circus has failed to provide.
Wednesday. You listen to a side angle. We're having some technical difficulties with Facebook. Hopefully that will resolve itself. They'll fix it, they say. Hence the show starting about 9 minutes late. Want to make sure that everything is in place. Having said that, today's show is going to be pretty quick, pretty direct, pretty focused. California is passing, or at least putting up for the governor, a new fast food legislation that could allow people to be paid up to $22 an hour. That'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where that cost goes. I'm guessing it'll come directly to the consumer. Beyond that, obstruction of justice may be a real thing for Trump and post the Mar-a-Lago raid. And again, I'm not here to talk about Trump every day. I'm going to talk about what the potential impact is on us of that. That would be the point of me sharing that information again. And then, I've taken Fox, not to task, but I've shared my thoughts on some of the coverage that they've provided. I did it recently. Not sure what's going on, but there's lots of flashing buttons and lights and things on my end of the screen. I apologize. Again, this is why this is only out to friends and family so far. We want to make sure we can get these glitches worked out. We are going in the right direction before we give it to the masses. That's really the whole point as we try to figure some of these things out. Looks like I've got to reconnect some Facebook things. Not quite sure how they're disconnected, why they're disconnected, but let me take that step. And I apologize again. So California's fast food bill, obstruction of justice. And then as I started to say, I've taken Fox to the woodshed. And I am no one of particular importance. It was just my opinion. And it was about some of the coverage. It was about some of the things that they were saying. It was about my lack of understanding of how they drew the conclusions that they did. And then the reality and accepting and even describing to all of you that we already know that people do most things for money, at least when they go to work. Fox News is no different. Rupert Murdoch is no different in wanting to build an empire and make money as a result of it. So each of them has to consider who their audience is, how they grow their audience, how they maintain their audience so that they can go after advertising dollars. And when they do that, that's where they become lucrative. So they preach to the choir. Oftentimes they're talking to people that they know already believe what they have to say. But in many cases, they're actually feeding, I don't want to call it a frenzy, but they're feeding people information that, I don't know, maybe people shouldn't believe or people should be questioning more. So they almost create the thirst. They almost create the need for the information that they're providing because they help convince people that the approach or the angle that they're taking is accurate. Well, if they're going to do that, then they've got to feed you that information over and over again to keep you coming back. I get it. I get it. That's what they're in the business of. And if I wanted to make this thing grow much faster, I would pick a side and I would just go to town on each of those sides. I literally would go to town on each of those sides. But that's not what this is about. For me, it's a passion, talk politics, see if there's a more reasonable approach to the issues that affect people on a day-to-day basis, see if there's a middle to the left and the right. So it's a personal passion. It's one that I would love to see grow. It's one that I will at some point be able to dedicate the time to make that happen. And trust me, I'm going to get there. There have been people who doubted me in various things and thought, oh, he'll never make something of that. And I make it my point to make something of that because they said I couldn't. I'm just motivated that way in some cases. Having said that, it's time to take MSNBC to task. So that's something that we'll do in a little while. Now, I don't have all of the things that I normally use to get this thing started. So I'm going to reload them one by one. I apologize. If we weren't live, I would start over. That's probably the best way to describe it. But we're live, so I won't be starting anything over. I'm just going to wing it until we get there. But again, these are the types of things that I want to be able to work through before we try to reach out to the masses. I am appreciative of friends and family tolerating these sorts of things because they happen. They happen to newbies. And I think I've said a few times, one of the biggest things people have to overcome if they decide that they want to get online, they want to do a podcast, they want to do a show, or as I was in the radio business many years ago, with the new media, with the new things that are available, the best way to actually get back into it is to just do it. So you're enduring the episodes where I'm just doing it and it'll work or it won't work, but I'm going to go find out, which is where we are today. I appreciate you being here. You know, we're here noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Twitter. You can comment on any of those places, and some of the places, if you comment, I'll see the comment on the screen. I can add it, and I can introduce you into the subject. There are days when I make available the ability for people to jump in on the show. There are days when I hope to do quick rants and get through it a little bit quicker, so that isn't necessarily the case. Today is one of those things where I'd like to present some things, see what you think. You're going to hear what I think, but ultimately, it's because we are in the most divisive nation in the most divisive time in our nation that I can remember. And I'm sure there were times where people felt more pressure. They felt the pinch. It was bigger than it might be today, but I'm 48 and I've seen a lot of things and I had a different appreciation for different things at different times. But right now is odd to me. And again, it's part of my motivation for being here. But let's bring in this piece about the California fast food bill, because there are some questions that I had even as a youngster that I continue to have today, but as I get older, I start to understand the picture a little bit better. Let's take a look.
For months of rallies across California, the new legislative victory for fast food workers could transform the industry and significantly impact the wages earned by hundreds of thousands of low-paid workers.
I'm overjoyed. I never thought to be part of a movement like this.
Under the bill, employees like Evelyn Barrias could easily make up to $22 an hour starting next year, and an annual cost of living adjustment.
I have 4 children. We're barely making ends meet to pay for our apartment. It would change my life completely.
Still in need of the governor's approval, the measure is a major step toward sectoral bargaining, which gives workers a seat at the table with employers. Rare in the United States, only sectors like auto manufacturing use similar negotiations.
This bill brings equity for Black and Latino fast food workers up and down the state of California. It means that they can both put food on the table and gas in the tank.
Impacting restaurant chains with at least 100 locations nationwide, experts believe raising wages will increase salaries for those in other sectors like retail. Some argue it also comes at a cost.
What's the impact for customers?
Yeah, I think customers are going to see a 20% effective food tax on menu items just to pay for this bill.
Tonight, the fight over fast food laws and its impact on both sides of the counter. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
There it is. It makes very clear sense of a problem that is, at the moment, completely unavoidable. If you live in California and you make less than minimum wage, I mean, you can't, but we've been working to get to $15 an hour for some time. I think the living wage in Southern California was $14.60, and this was several years ago. I don't know the actual number at this moment. But what I can tell you is if you're trying to survive off of a job at a fast food restaurant, you're going to have an incredibly, incredibly tough time doing that. Now, here's the contention that I used to have. And I say used to because I'm trying to, I wouldn't use the word evolve. Of course, I'm trying to evolve, but I'll say this. I'm trying to get a better understanding of where people are at, how they get there, what they would need in order to go somewhere else. And I always used to argue about people making a very low wage at fast food. I always used to say it's not a career. It's not a job that, I don't know. It's not the type of thing where you can raise your family. And the reason I used to say that is because I assumed if they were willing to give people in high school that job, if they're willing to let anybody come in and learn how to do the day-to-day work, it must not be at a high enough level that you needed an education or you needed to be older or your maturity level or the things that, high school kids don't have are able to go into a workplace with. So I always assumed the people that are trying to get these jobs and hold on to these jobs have to understand the jobs weren't intended for them to raise their families on. And then I got older, and then I started to see the lack of education or the challenges that people face, even the challenges that immigrants face, just the different reasons that people end up at a fast food job and are not able to, because it's certainly not a lack of effort or work. There are people who go to fast food jobs and work harder than people who have much higher paying jobs. Just practically, there are people who go to fast food jobs and have a harder day. So I've moderated. I've done what I hope that this show can do. I've moderated in that there has to be another explanation. There has to be another side. There has to be other opinions and things that I'm just not taking into consideration. And if I just bully my way through and just automatically make the assumption, no, how I think about this must be the way it is, we end up with how we have this major divide in our country. So if you look at this, and not the specifics of the bill, but the idea of the bill, the idea of someone in fast food making $22 an hour seems high. But the market will take care of that. The market will address that situation. If you, in fact, have to pay people $22 an hour for the same jobs that they were making $9, $10, $11, $12 an hour for before, they're either going to have to reduce the number of people doing the work, they'll have to automate the systems that get the job done, and quite frankly, have machines do more of the work than people, or they're going to have to raise the prices of the products that they sell based on the cost of the labor. So with those three choices in mind, I think the market is going to tend to take care of itself if the legislation passes. Governor Gavin Newsom in California, who, you know, he and I have had our conflict, and we had to go to battle, and things worked out for our side, my side of that, the community side that I was representing. It worked out for us. But he hasn't signed the bill. You know, some think he's thinking about running for president. So he's got to do populist things and raising, even if people start to speculate or people start to label it or like write a different narrative, and the new narrative is something like, oh, well, the new minimum wage is $22 an hour now. That's what I'm expecting people to start saying. It's $22 an hour. He can't let that happen if he actually wants to be president. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. But the bill will be in front of him. Is it worth $22 an hour? Well, the market will say yes or no. Is a high school kid worth $22 an hour, working part-time when his schedule allows, between sports, clubs, activities? Is that the criteria for someone making $22 an hour? Can it be part-time? Can it be first-timers? Is it for people that are just full-time? Now, there are other things in there, like making sure they get their mandatory breaks. Come on, some of these people are dealing with safety issues. Some of these people are working multiple jobs. We have to maintain sanity within the workplace. And the idea that there are workplaces that take advantage of people, take advantage of particularly immigrants, which you hear lots of stories about, I understand going after those people. Things are supposed to be right. And I think if you get reasonable people in a room and you talk about what's right or wrong, you'll be able to draw that conclusion. But if the legislation goes through and wages for some of the people who work in fast food get as high as $22, the market will take care of itself. If the market goes to 22, and let's use a company like McDonald's, and this is just for example, they raise prices to reflect the new wages, maybe people will go there less. That's just the reality. The market can help with that adjustment. Or McDonald's, being a pretty advanced, pretty technologically sound company, may come up with ways to have your Big Mac made by a machine and you don't even need that person. It's possible. How many McDonald's do you go to now where they encourage you not to go to the counter? They'd rather you use a big machine, a big kiosk for your order, and the only people you need are the people to make your order and serve it up to you at the counter. I try not to go to fast food too often. If you know me, you know that sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But I try not to. The last time I went to Las Vegas, we stopped in Barstow. A lot of people stop in Barstow for a bathroom break. There's the old train station. There's the old McDonald's. They don't take your order at the counter anymore. They want you to go to the kiosk. That's one less person that you have to pay $22 an hour. The market will take care of it. It literally will take care of it. So it'll be curious to see. I know the debates have been going on in region after region after region. I know California, who's striving for that $15 an hour minimum wage, and there are states that are still like $7.25, $8. Cost of living is different. I understand that different regions have different needs, different interests. I get it. I'm not trying to debate what matters for you, but I can tell you the market's likely going to take care of this one. But the parts of the bill where they're just being human to humans, that works for me. Again, if California wasn't a supermajority and the Republican vote meant something here, or better yet, a third party was involved, and we would have that moderating view, what would it look like then? That would be the true test of what we think things are worth. Because if, for instance, people got to vote on a $22 minimum wage, but it said in the disclaimer, prices will go up 20%, or we're going to lay off 20% of the people in favor of automation, when you add all of those pieces rather than just the interests of one group or one party, it starts to take on a different look. It really starts to take on a different look. That look is obviously, if you listen to this show at all, the look I'm much, much more interested in. We'll see how that goes. I'll try to keep us up to date on that as new information becomes available. It's just one of those interesting topics. It's amazing where we end up and how we get there. It amazes me. Next up, again, I don't have any interest in covering Trump for the sake of covering Trump. He is an interesting character. He's an influential character. He is a bold character. He is an admired character for some. He is despised by others. He really is. I get it. I don't want to talk about Trump every day. I do want to talk about the American culture surrounding that. I want to talk to the people who support him without question, without fail, who will not listen to the details of anything and give their comment. I'm not telling them what their comment should be. I'm not trying to tell you how you should feel. Obviously, I have opinions. I get caught up in emotion. I get caught up, and I've declared before, much of the litmus test for me in trying to decide what matters to me is how it translates to my children. What message or lesson would I give to my children? What message or lesson would I want them to carry through life? And what message or lesson would, if I was ever fortunate enough to have grandchildren, what message would I want them to give my grandchildren? And that litmus test, it's not a crazy standard. And it takes into account there are certain things you say to a child that don't apply to adults. But my sons are getting older. One is an adult. So some of these things start to have a more direct correlation in terms of what I think is reasonable or acceptable. Can I always hold myself to the same standard that I tell my children? No. You've heard the saying, do what I say, not what I do. I'm sure I'm guilty. But the basis for the continual conversations is the long-term impact on my children, your children, our potential grandchildren, the world around us, the culture around us, the violence, the hate, the anger, and obviously, quite frankly, the divide. That's why I'm here. Having said that, more reporting on the latest information from the Mar-a-Lago raid, the documents, more court filings, more information from that as a whole. Here it is.
The Justice Department revealing the most information to date and why agents searched former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home, finding some 322 classified documents, many of them top secret. And what we are learning this morning is raising serious new questions.
It sure does. The feds are calling on the judge to reject the request from the Trump lawyers for a special master review device. They also released new evidence, including this photo. Look at this right here. Highly classified material that they found at Mar-a-Lago, some kept in the former president's desk. And the filing reveals new details about the investigation, raises new questions about obstruction of justice. Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas starts us off from the Justice Department. Good morning, Pierre.
George, good morning. Overnight, the Justice Department filing a stunning new motion challenging Trump's request for a special master and offering explosive new details alleging lies and obstruction of justice. This morning, the first look inside the FBI's dramatic search of Mar-a-Lago. This photograph showing document after document, labeled secret and top secret in bold red letters, recovered at an unsecured resort. Look closely, you'll see one labeled HCS, initials for Human Intelligence Control System, meaning it likely contains information about or the identities of U.S. spies and informants. DOJ's 36 motion challenging Trump's need for a special master also provides the most detailed narrative thus far of why the FBI took the extraordinary step of searching the home and offices of a former president. The new details include a rare submission of grand jury material from an ongoing investigation. Revealing in May, a grand jury subpoena was issued for classified documents stored at Mar-a-Lago. The filing describing how FBI officials went to the resort to pursue the material in June. DOJ suggesting that the Trump team was misleading at every turn. This filing includes a June 3rd document from a Trump attorney certifying that all classified documents had been turned over. But soon afterwards, the FBI uncovering multiple sources of evidence indicating that the response to the May 11th grand jury subpoena was incomplete and that the classified documents remained at the premises. And for the first time, startling specific allegations of obstruction of justice. According to the court filing, the FBI developed evidence that government records were likely concealed and removed from the storage room at Mar-a-Lago, and that efforts were likely taken to obstruct the government's investigation. Some of that classified material found in a series of desks in Trump's office. More than 100 documents recovered. Again, this after Trump's attorney had claimed that all the material had been turned over.
DOJ officials claim Trump has little to no standing to request a special master review of documents based on issues of privilege. They said there could be no claim of executive privilege because the classified documents do not belong to Trump. They belong to the U.S. government. George?
Thanks. It's bringing our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. You had some midnight reading.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it right now. Earlier, you thought we didn't know enough based on the earlier affidavits to determine whether it was likely that former President Trump would be indicted. How does this change your view?
Look, none of this is good for Donald Trump, right? Anything in here simply increases the chance of a possible indictment. But it doesn't answer the fundamental question, which is, was the primary goal of the FBI to get the stuff back? To say we need to secure this stuff, or is it both to secure the stuff and to pursue a potential criminal case?
You heard it. Is there enough? Is it new enough? Here's the problem I have with this. We knew all of this. We've talked about all of this on the show. I couldn't show you actual documents. I couldn't show you the HCS designation, which is Human Intelligence Control Systems. But I did talk about the fact that for those people that were creating a narrative or describing the behavior as non-controversial because he declassified all the information. I've asked the question, do you really want him declassifying this information? Would you like our methods and sources, the people who risk their lives, the spies who do their job to protect America, to be revealed so that Trump can get out of being held accountable for having these documents at his house and now we find in his desk, which clearly couldn't be the most secure place in the world. The FBI was concerned about it. They've been negotiating for 18 months. They sent him a subpoena in May. In June, they got a document that said that they had all the information. And then they go in August and we find out that that's not the case. In all the narratives that we get, is it still a witch hunt? Is it still them just trying to get him? Is it still just gotcha? At some point, is it just he did something he's not supposed to do? Give the document back. Give the documents back, number one. Number two, give them back when they're asked for because they don't belong to you. Don't try to hide behind attorney-client privilege. Don't try to hide behind executive privilege. Don't try to hide behind anything. People who are calling for transparency are often the ones the least transparent. I'm just saying, outside of a criminal indictment, outside of criminal charges, why, as a form of right and wrong, common sense, what people are willing to tolerate and what people aren't willing to tolerate, are we still having a discussion about documents that belong to the U.S. government? And I've looked to see the latest response from as many Republicans as possible. And as more and more information comes out, it gets a little quieter in terms of what people's response are. I did check out True Social. True Social, people sort of address it without actually addressing the specifics of any piece of information. There are lots of generalizations about what people think of the situation as a whole, but not much about, okay, they found documents that say HCS on them. What do you think the impact is on the people who have to go gather that information? They're not addressing the specifics, and I want that to happen because there may be an answer for Trump supporters that non-supporters need to hear. We're divided, but we still have to understand both sides of the issue. If we don't, it's going to be hard to come to a middle ground and understand, okay, where do we go from here? First, get the documents back. Second, how do we protect ourselves from this ever happening again? And if it reaches the level that there are too many people, too many things that have already been put at risk, there's been too much disregard, or what they said more specifically now is that there was an attempt to move, hide, keep the documents from being passed on, is there a consequence that's normally paid for the average person? I know, let's go back to Hillary Clinton. The only distinction I can make, not even in the number of documents, they said she had 113. They said they found 300 from Trump with 11 news sets. She gave up 30,000 emails. People are speculating about the ones that were deleted. The FBI said the ones that were deleted, it was in the normal course of deleting emails, not a mass deletion once the information was requested. But let's put all of that aside and just say this. Hillary Clinton testified on this issue for 3 hours in front of Congress. So if you want to compare the two, will you be asking that Donald Trump testify in front of Congress now? Will you be asking that he risk the penalty of perjury by testifying in front of Congress about the activities related to the documents, very much like Hillary Clinton, who was subpoenaed, who did turn over information? Donald Trump turned over some information. He was subpoenaed. His attorney said it was all in, even though it wasn't. if we're going to compare apples to apples, will Donald Trump sit for 3 hours worth of testimony in front of Congress under the penalty of perjury to answer questions about what's going on? Why does that matter? It matters because I told you yesterday about a poll that said most Trump supporters believe a civil war is somewhat likely. And I said most Trump supporters believe it is somewhat likely, a civil war is somewhat likely in the next 10 years. So at some point, I don't know when the consequences of things getting out of hand in either direction go so far or get so bad that we literally can just find ways to ignore it and not address it as a people, not as politicians, not as partisans, but as people. I could draw the same correlation to Seattle, where they took over a block. That's absurd. At what point do we draw the line and say, you can't take over city streets? They're not yours. They belong to the public. Access to them belongs to the public. Access to them belongs to the private citizens who own pieces of property on those streets. It's equally absurd. But we as a people, not we as a side, not we as a side to the point where, you know, many people on the left didn't say anything about what was going on in Seattle. No big deal. Not on their radar, not a concern. Step up, speak up, say something. Likewise, at what point do the things that start to add up with Donald Trump not pass the litmus test of what you would tolerate from your adult or child or, you know, children? At what point is there a test of your values that say it doesn't matter what good we get from him, we can't allow the bad? And then the next question, and this goes to either party as well. At what point do you tell yourself, and I mean you really tell yourself, we can get these things from someone with more integrity. We can get these things from people that are more honest. We can get these things from people who, I don't know, have their act together, but still want to get or make the same progress that we, even in partisan politics, believe is important. Why would we allow the worst of anything and anybody to lead the way? Not declaring that he's the worst. I'm sure there are people who others have found far worse. I'm telling you in relation to describing what's right or wrong to my children, he doesn't rank very high. But again, the point of this show isn't to tell you that you should think he doesn't rank very high. It's for you to tell us what you think and for we, the people, to decide where the line and where the limit is and what compromise looks like and what is too far and what's not. Because right now, we're going off the rails. It's crazy where we've allowed ourselves to go, and we do it unchecked. So help us if the spies or the people who are training to protect America's national secrets, the people who risk their lives to gather intelligence from other places, get revealed to cover up for the fact that the Trump people, I can't call it the administration, Trump and his people didn't want to give up documents that they don't own. You'll hear a little bit more about that. This time is Joe Biden talking about it. But I'm going to switch. In this one, if you've heard me talk about Fox News, they asked such a silly question in a clip that I showed yesterday. I couldn't believe the silly question. After the information that was reported, I said to myself, how do you come up with that at the end of that information? How is that your question? I've described money, advertising, business. MSNBC. I understand that this is an opinion piece you're about to hear. It's a long one. I'm going to cut into it and talk about things as we go so that we don't have to endure the whole thing. I understand there are people who agree with this opinion. But there are some things thrown in here, I don't get it. There are some things thrown in here that if you are like the average person that does not have a crack staff of reporters, they don't have the time or wherewithal to dig into things so deeply that you get a firsthand account or acknowledgement of exactly what's going on in DC, exactly what happens in your state house, exactly what happens in your city hall or county administration building. Assuming you don't have those things and you are forced, like everyone else, to listen to or look at or read the news, there are a lot of people who believe it because it was said. And now we're at a time where a lot of people believe things just because it was said on social media. The vetting and credentials and credibility of information that we receive is so bad right now that I understand how the media drives the divide. I'm not telling them how to run their business. I'm not even telling them not to do it. That's their prerogative. The market can also decide, I'm going to watch that station, even though I know their bias is so in your face, you couldn't avoid it if you wanted to. but I'm critical of Fox. And the funny thing about this piece I'm going to show you is that the host who's going to be sharing his opinion, it's not news. He's not trying to present it as facts. At least I hope not. As he presents his facts, he starts off by calling it the Fox Propaganda Network, which I found interesting because for the rest of his piece, I don't know how you could describe it as anything other than that, too. In hopes of getting people to have respectful, thoughtful conversations about the things that divide us, you have to point out the things that widen the divide. Take a look.
The Justice Department revealing
Graham is now afraid of himself, a quisling afraid of his shadow. And Lindsey Graham proved that tonight by going on Fox to lie about what he said on the Fox propaganda channel on Sunday. Lindsey Graham is now afraid of his own words, afraid to repeat them, so he lied about them tonight. Lindsey Graham did not dare to repeat what he said, didn't dare to repeat it tonight after 2 days of relentless criticism of Lindsey Graham, including on this program last night, and culminating at the end of the day today with Joe Biden, of all people, attacking Lindsey Graham for saying that if Donald Trump is indicted, there will be rioting in the streets. And I say Joe Biden, of all people, because the very last thing Joe Biden wants to do is attack a United States senator. In Joe Biden's Senate, and in the Senate where I worked in the 1990s, that just was not done. But no one in the United States Senate in those days reached the peak of indecency that Lindsey Graham reached Sunday night when he said there will be rioting in the streets. Not even Strom Thurmond.
I'm going to stop there. I agree that a U.S. Senator suggesting prior to something happening that there'll be rioting in the streets is probably not the wisest statement. It's probably not the first thing I would say, even if I thought it were true. And if I thought it were true, I think I would try to spend a lot of time qualifying that it shouldn't happen. Don't do it. Let's be prepared. Let's temper our feelings, our animosity, our whatever emotion you have to make sure we avoid that. And I'll go back to Black Lives Matter. If you think that there are Black people who wanted justice for people who we believed had been mistreated by the police, if you think that our push or motivation were riots, I can speak for a significant percentage of us. No, it was not. Rioters and looters are criminals. They are people taking advantage of chaos and the potential for lawlessness, and they're disgusting. And if you're listening and you rioted or you looted and you thought you were doing it on behalf of Black people, let me be the first to tell you you were not. And just because you may have been Black is not the qualification that works for me. If you were some white guy and you thought you were fighting for the people and the way you could do that is to burn a building down, you weren't representing anybody but your arsonist self. It's unfortunate that the riots actually get police departments and mayors to get their police departments and their act together. It's unfortunate. But to come on as a U.S. Senator and say, if you do this, there will be this, gives the impression that we either shouldn't do that, in this case, arrest Donald Trump, if there are the criminal charges that arise from the investigations that are going on. So it's either an attempt to get them not to do that, or it's almost like an alarm. If this happens, this is what's going to happen. I can't call it incitement and encouragement. I don't know that that was his point. I can't get in his head and speak to that. And I can tell you up to this point, Lawrence here was accurate in that he hasn't repeated it. He's avoiding re-saying the same thing. I don't know if he regrets it. I didn't ask him. I haven't heard anybody else ask him the direct question and him give a direct answer so that we have an understanding of what's in his head. We can't even question the veracity of it. I haven't heard an answer. But I agree, a U.S. Senator shouldn't do it. But MSNBC is about to go in a different direction. And it blew my mind. I didn't know this about Strom Thurmond, but even at this moment, other than to say that he at some point used racism to carry out his goals as a senator. And there's some irony to him using racism to do that. And most of you know that history. But for those of you who don't, you're about to see it. But for the life of me, other than the fact that they both came from the same state, Strom Thurmond didn't run, Graham did, Graham won, he's in office. I can't tell you for the life of me why you're about to hear this next piece. I'm going to play it anyway. It's part of the divide.
Lindsey Graham is a United States Senator because Strom Thurmond could not live forever, even though he tried. South Carolina's very senior Senator Strom Thurmond chose not to run for re-election to the Senate when he was 100 years old, thereby creating the opening for Congressman Lindsey Graham to move up in 2002 in that election. The next year, Strom Thurmond died at age 101. 6 months later, we discovered that Strom Thurmond had a secret, a big one. Strom Thurmond had a daughter who he never publicly acknowledged. She was born before Strom Thurmond was married. He was 23 years old, and the teenage girl he got pregnant, who was working in his parents' home, was 16 years old. Strom Thurmond's first child, Essie Mae Washington Williams, who died in 2013, was black. Strom Thurmond, always knowing that he had a black daughter, built his political career on racism and sexism.
I'm going to stop there. Strom Thurmond built his career on racism and sexism, or segregation. Not addressing that right now. Strom Thurmond had a black daughter. Not my goal to address that right now. My question is in relation to Lindsey Graham and Joe Biden, which is the title that they have on the screen right there. What does one have to do with another? How did you end up talking about Strom Thurmond's black child, even though he was a racist and for segregation? Huh? Is there a correlation you're drawing between Strom Thurmond and Lindsey Graham in some way, shape, or form? And I'm going to let him speak for himself and carry it out. But boy, not sure what one has to do with the other than to paint a picture, a connection between the two that I don't necessarily understand completely. MSNBC wants to speak to a group of people who are going to be angered by the Strom Thurmond story. The connection between Strom Thurmond and Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, the Senate seat that Lindsey Graham was able to run for as a result of Strom Thurmond being 100 years old. I don't get it. MSNBC, wow, what are you doing? Huh? Let's go on.
Segregation. And South Carolina's white voters rewarded him for his racist segregationist policies and for the filibusters against civil rights legislation that he joined on the Senate floor. Like Lindsey Graham, Strom Thurmond never apologized for anything. But even Strom Thurmond never said, if the leader of my party is indicted, there will be rioting in the streets. No senator has ever said that. When a special prosecutor was investigating Republican President Richard Nixon, Republican Senator Strom Thurmond did not say, if Nixon is charged with crimes or impeached, there will be rioting in the streets. Even Strom Thurmond knew a United States Senator should never say that. Never.
I'll stop there.
Lindsey Graham?
Maybe it's the connection with, in his eyes, Strom Thurmond was such a bad person, but even the worst of people wouldn't say that there'll be rioting in the streets if you hold a former president accountable. Maybe that was it. I don't know.
His weakness in fawning over Donald Trump is something we had never seen in a senator before Donald Trump invaded and conquered the Republican Party. Whatever explains Lindsey Graham, we may never know. Perhaps we'll learn more about him 6 months after his death, as we did with Strom Thurmond. Maybe in that peculiar South Carolina Republican Senate tradition, Lindsey Graham has a secret. And the person Lindsey Graham knows who loves secrets the most is Donald Trump.
Maybe Lindsey Graham has a secret. What's the secret? What does it have to do with rioting in the streets? Where are you going? Is this real? Is this real? You have to understand these are real questions for me. I don't know that I understand exactly what's being said or why it's being said. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't necessarily get it. MSNBC, wow.
We now know that Donald Trump has been happily riding around in golf carts in Florida, knowing that in the basement he had a government document identified in the FBI inventory of the FBI search as Info Ray, President of France. Donald Trump showed Lindsey Graham what he is capable of in the 2016 presidential campaign, when Lindsey Graham was still campaigning against Donald Trump and accurately criticizing Donald Trump. And then this happened.
He gave me his number, and I found the card. I wrote the number down. I don't know if it's the right number. Let's try it. 202-228-0292. I don't know. Maybe it's, it's 3-4 years ago, so maybe it's an old number. 202-228-0292. So, I don't know. Give it a shot.
It was Lindsey Graham's phone number. Donald Trump gave out Lindsey Graham's private cell phone number on TV. Imagine the fear Lindsey Graham has lived with since then, the fear of Donald Trump, the fear of what Donald Trump could reveal about him. And Lindsey Graham knows that Donald Trump is a pathological liar. So Lindsey Graham knows Donald Trump could say something about him that is false.
That's all true. Donald Trump could know something. Donald Trump could have an impact on his career. Are you assuming he said that for Donald Trump specifically in fear of those things? There are so many inferences that are drawn from the conversation that I'm not certain where we're trying to go or how we got there, but it's an opinion piece. It's not news. But as I said, most people have to go somewhere to get the information. And most people rely on the cable network, CNN, MSNBC, Fox. There are people on the right who go to Blaze and Breitbart and the Washington Times versus the Washington Post and all the different resources we have. And depending on what you put out there, is a significant factor in the actual divide itself. Let's go on.
Say something about Lindsey Graham that Donald Trump couldn't prove. That conscience question, what are you going to tell your children and grandchildren you did to stop Donald Trump, does not apply to Lindsey Graham. Unlike Strom Thurmond, Lindsey Graham does not have children and is not suspected of having children that we don't know about. Never been married. Doesn't even have a dog. He has, by outward appearance, no one and nothing to love more than the title senator. And that probably explains Lindsey Graham as well as anything can. He will do anything and say anything to hold on to the title of senator, a title he knows Donald Trump could rip away from him by endorsing another Republican to run against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. If that is the explanation of Lindsey Graham, think of the hollowness of that man. Think of the emptiness where conscience is supposed to reside in him. The two most miserable politicians in America tonight are Lindsey Graham and the man he serves, Donald Trump. Both fighting criminal investigations of their conduct. When Lindsey Graham went on Fox tonight, he was not asked a single question about the subpoena for him to testify to a Georgia grand jury about his and Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the presidential election in Georgia. But the host did show Lindsey Graham what Joe Biden said about him today and invited Lindsey Graham to lie his way out of it.
But, Senator, he did bring you up, not specifically, but he brought up a comment you made on Sunday. Let's listen.
Yeah. The idea you turn on the television and see senior senators and congressmen saying, if such and such happens, there'll be blood in the street. Where the hell are we?
Senator, he's referring to you. What is he talking about? I guess it was a comment you made Sunday when asked.
I can't infer anything from this smile, but the seriousness of it for some, and certainly anybody who thinks that there might be a riot as a result of it, is probably a little bit more real. Again, I would say the same thing to any leader for any cause that would suggest that a riot is what is the consequence of someone taking an action, even if that action is legal and sound and been adjudicated and all the details that make something credible and worthy of doing. That's a politician's smile. I'll say that part, because he did make the comment. He hasn't been willing to back it up since, and he's about to go in a different direction. But as MSNBC presents it, I still say, wow.
About when President Trump is arrested or indicted.
Yeah, so what I said Sunday was I reject violence.
That's a lie. He never said that on Sunday. Lindsey Graham never said that Americans reject violence, and he never said I reject violence. Here's the rest of Lindsey Graham's answer tonight.
But I also reject a double standard here. So if they try to prosecute President Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, when she was Secretary of State, people in this country will lose faith in law enforcement.
That is another Lindsey Graham lie. That is not what Lindsey Graham said. On Sunday, Lindsey Graham did not say if Donald Trump is prosecuted, people in this country will lose faith in law enforcement. Here are the words that Lindsey Graham actually said on Fox on Sunday that he is now so afraid of, he dares not to say them again.
And I'll say this. If there's a prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets.
Fox owns that video. Fox owns the video of Lindsey Graham saying there'll be riots in the streets. Fox could have showed that video to Lindsey Graham tonight. But Fox will not show that video again. That's not the way Rupert Murdoch does business. There'll be riots in the streets. That was Sunday night. Tonight, Lindsey Graham changes that to people in this country will lose faith in law enforcement. Lindsey Graham turned Republicans into the riots in the streets party this week, and now
I've got to stop you there. I'm pretty sure Lindsey Graham turned himself into a riots in the street Republican to assume that all people feel that way, agree, will do it, support it, will take the same approach, will lie about it, will do all the things Lindsey Graham has or hasn't done is probably a stretch.
Now he's trying to run away from what he said. And today, Joe Biden made sure that people understand what Lindsey Graham was talking about when he was predicting or advocating riots in the streets. President Biden talked about the Trump riot that already happened on January 6th at the United States Capitol.
Cops attacked and assaulted, speared with flagpoles, sprayed with mace, stomped on, dragged, brutalized. Police lost their lives as a result of that day. Police lost their lives. One of the officers said it was worse than anything he had experienced in war in Iraq. So let me say this to my MAGA Republican friends in Congress. Don't tell me you support law enforcement if you won't condemn what happened on the 6th. Don't tell me. Can't do it. For God's sake, whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Look, you're either on the side of a mob or the side of the police. You can't be pro-law enforcement and pro-insurrection. You can't be a party of law and order and call the people who attacked the police on January 6th patriots. You can't do it.
You've heard it. MSNBC, wow. Your presentation of it, including Strom Thurmond, his black daughter, even though he was a racist and forced segregation, don't know the transition from that to Lindsey Graham, other than Lindsey Graham stepped in after him. The speculation about Lindsey Graham maybe having secrets, speculation about maybe Trump knowing those secrets, revealing those secrets, or causing harm or damage to him such that it would get Lindsey Graham to be willing to be a U.S. senator and say there'll be riots in the streets. We are responsible for our nation. The people who speak to the nation, the people who represent the nation, the people who lead the representation the nation are responsible for the outcomes. We on the listening end, we on the consumer side, we the people just trying to carry out our lives on a day-to-day basis have obligations too. A lot of all of that is failing. So the controversies, the issues, the things that we're faced with, they're a result of all of the parties involved. So I just happened to pick out MSNBC today because that message rung a bell. It was loud for me. And I have to be honest, and I'd be happy to take a lie detector test. That is the longest consecutive clip pieces time I've spent on MSNBC in 20 years. I've heard what people think of it. I'm not surprised, having been reviewing the news, looking at the headlines, listening to how some of the stories are reported, finding this particular clip and being blown away that they are living up to, this person is living up to the bias, adding pieces to the story that I don't know how connect, but that help paint a negative picture, a negative connotation, and then putting on a campaign rally for Joe Biden in effort to have thoughtful, respectful conversation, which I hope to have. I can say the media does help drive the divide, but they make money off of it. So it's not something that I think I can ask them to stop, because I don't think they're in business because of a moral obligation. I'm in this business because I like talking politics. I like thoughtful, respectful conversations about divisive issues in hopes that people can find common ground or a middle ground. I don't have much common ground with this particular viewer who shared exactly what he thought of me in YouTube. It's called the United States, you moron. Again, I prefer thoughtful and respectful, but ultimately I want to be able to have real conversations on this show with real people with differing opinions, because we still live in the same shared space. We still have the same objectives of living a good life and being able to take care of our children and them growing up happy and healthy. We're all human beings, so ultimately we really do have the same objective. But as the divide would go, it takes a lot to call someone a moron that you don't know, or to not understand what a metaphor is, or a concept, or a theory. The divided states of America is a concept. I think we're divided. I think it's typically along party lines. Sometimes it's along race. Sometimes it's by gender. In any case, it's not my goal to keep it that way. It's not my goal to make it more divided. It's to have the discussions with the people who disagree. This particular person and I disagree. Aaron J. Met, we don't agree. I would rather have a thoughtful, respectful conversation, so I invite you at any time, at all times, come on the show and we can talk about it. I know where we live and I know what this country represents. I know who I pledge allegiance to. I know who is important to me, whom is important to me, what's important to me. The United States of America is important. It's so important that I would like to do more to get us to be united than to continue divided. But while we're divided, we're going to talk about it here on the Divided States of America show. We're here weekdays at noon, 3 p.m. Pacific, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I hope to have you all come back. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you engage in the debates online and anywhere they might be, because that is, in fact, the point. I appreciate you tuning in today. I will be back tomorrow with more. Thanks again for listening to the Divided States of America.
Thanks for watching the Divided States of America show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel and share this video with your family and friends.